Hi guys, T here. It's getting to be October now and it's almost Halloween, so I thought that we might talk about some undead today. And I got a comment some time ago asking me to talk about skeletons and liches and vampires and stuff, and I thought maybe this would be around the right time to pull up all the nasty ghosty goos that you see this time of year. And I thought I would focus on a basic one to begin with because they're often overlooked. Skeletons in your D&D game or your Pathfinder game or whatever it happens to be. Skeletons get a bad rap, in my opinion, because number one, a lot of DMs don't understand how to run undead properly. Like, there's a lot of extra rules and quips and little things, and number two, they're not very impressive most of the time. Like, you've already played Diablo, you've already played Torchlight, and any other RPG that just has, oh, skeletons, ooh, or you're in a crypt, you expect skeletons to be up and wandering around. Whether there's a necromancer around or not, they're, like I said, most DMs really mistreat the undead template. And that's another thing. That being a skeleton, skeletons are not monsters. They are an undead template. They have to be something alive first, whether it be a dragon, a giant, an elf, a dwarf, whatever. And then after they die, they are brought back to animation, not necessarily intelligence, by necromantic magic. And they are up and wandering around, whether it be to attack something, to guard a location, etc., etc. So I've got my little cue card of points and things to talk about, and maybe we can learn a thing or two today. The first thing, and I'm just going to talk about this from a DM's perspective, as far as how to run skeletons and undead similar properly. So you may hear a lot of stuff you already know, but you may learn a thing or two as far as details go. Like skeletons, for instance, a lot of DMs don't think about they don't feel pain. So that's why, they're immune to slashing damage. They're immune to piercing damage. Shooting a skeleton with an arrow doesn't matter. He's not going to feel it. Hitting a skeleton with a sword or an axe or anything doesn't matter. He doesn't feel pain. The only way to damage them is bludgeoning damage, which is, a mace, a staff, a stick, your fist, whatever. Throwing down your sword and punching a skeleton in the face is more effective than swinging your sword, because you're more likely, just with the blunt of your fist, to, shatter a skull or break a rib, and, depending on the skeleton's age, break it apart. That's the only way you're going to stop it. And even then, the more clever DMs were like, oh, well, you knocked his head off, but he's still running around. Or, you broke his limbs off, but his hand is still crawling around, clawing at your ankles. There's some DMs that'll keep going until you reduce them to dust, because bludgeoning damage is the only thing that hurts them. And sometimes there's elemental, blasting damage, acid damage, things like that. But most of them, by and large, have immunity to cold damage. They don't eat, they don't sleep, they don't breathe. You can't throw one in a lake and tie heavy stuff to it. It's not going to die, it's just going to stay there until the water eats away at it, or until the chains or the rope rot away or rust away, and then it's just going to walk back out again. You can't suffocate them. You have to bash them, you have to break them, which is a reason that many clerics run around with maces instead of bladed weaponry, or the reason that many fighters will not leave the house without, a slashing weapon, a piercing weapon, and a bludgeoning weapon, because if you run into undead, well, you can shoot a zombie in the face as many times as you want with a bow and arrow, but it's not going to matter because he doesn't feel pain, But staying on skeletons, even just like the water noose theory, if you've ever watched Monsters, Inc., a lot of delivery for a monster is how it enters the room. It's all about presence. It's all about what it does when you first see it. It if you wander into a room with your party and your DM's like, oh, there are 5 coffins, and as you enter the room they slide open and skeletons pop out, and they're gonna be like, ooh, skeletons, and they just break them to pieces. There is no fearing a skeleton if you do it that way. There's no point. They're brittle. They're not very strong most of the time. When they die as people, they lose all their class levels. They lose all their skills. Most of them lose all their spells unless they're imbued with spells in their weapons or whatever. They're not very impressive. They're not very strong. I think like a human skeleton on its own has a challenge rating of like 1/3. So they're goblin weak is why they're so unimpressive. But you might use numbers, you might use gear, but a skeleton on its own is not going to scare anybody. Which is why, watching this video, I'm going to help you kind of up your skeleton game and make them scary. So, first of all, what do you have when you have a skeleton? You have ribs, other than, the structure itself. You have necromantic magic, number 1. You have whatever gear it's wearing, number 2, so weapons, armor, etc. Number 3, you have all the undead characteristics, so it can't be poisoned, it can't be sneak attacked. There's no sneaking attack a skeleton because there are no weak points. It's just a bone structure. It can't be charmed. You can't make it walk off a cliff. You can't. There's so many things you can't do against undead. They have basic auditory hearing, and they're not very battle potent, but they're immune from so many things, and you can exploit the fuck out of that. Because, your thief suddenly can't do all this damage. The ranger carrying his bow and arrow, if he doesn't have any other weapons, he's going to have to just use his fisticuffs, and that's like a D4 of damage. So his battle efficiency immediately goes down. That fighter that is so proud of his D12, great axe, is not going to be doing jack against these things. Because you can hit them all you want, but you can't slay the beast with slashing or piercing damage. So as a DM, the first thing you need to do is read all of the undead rules and then enforce them. I have seen, and yes, I'll have to tell this as a different D&D story. I have seen a group of 3 skeletons just kick the shit out of a party of 6 because they did not understand that you can't stick a spear through a skeleton's eye hole and expect it to reel back in pain. You can throw fire on it, but it doesn't matter. They ran through every single damage immunity that these things had, and they just kept coming and just kept using their claw attacks. They didn't even have weapons, and they just wrecked these people because they didn't understand. Like I said for the 5th time, skeletons don't feel pain. Skeletons, there's so many things that they're immune to. You can't hurt them unless you're bludgeoning, unless you're blasting, unless you're breaking them apart with acid. Alchemist fire does you no good. You need vials of acid. You need, a long drop and a sudden stop is probably the best. Gravity is more your weapon than your big sword. And getting back to where I was, skeletons are relatively uninteresting. So you as a DM have to be creative in kind of dressing them up. So one thing that I think about a lot is that in the average person's life, there are 2, maybe 3 seriously religious days in your life, one of which is the day you get married, one of which is the birth of your first child, and then the last one is your funeral, the day you die. So, even if you were not a person of faith in your life, you may still end up with, a nice robe in your coffin. That is, you may end up with a nice robe or a necklace with a pendant with your holy symbol on it, or any number of things. And skeletons are affected by holy symbols if a cleric is wielding them, but doesn't mean they can't touch them or have them around their necks. try to remember what were these people buried in, or if not, what did, a necromancer dress them up in. Because if a necromancer just happens to have access to like a nice armory, suddenly you've got skeletons in chainmail, plate mail, wielding, great axes, long swords, cold steel, weird things that you can just think of. Like if you have a necromancer who's like a closet is the wrong word, underground necromancer who's like a lord or somebody with serious money, you can deck out skeletons with magic items, screaming arrows, boots of escape, or not boots of escape, boots of speed, cloaks of elven kind, like weird magic items. It's hard to say this without using the word skeleton, but they're skeletal monsters. They don't have any properties of their own beyond being undead, so you can have them do acid damage if you've got acid arrows. You can have them do cold steel damage. You can have them, dip their daggers in poison and then put them in their hands, and suddenly you've got a skeleton doing, knocking people out with local anesthetic. Because, necromancers know so much about the body and reanimating the dead, you might coat all their weapons with like a numbing agent, and then holy fuck, your entire adventuring party is screwed because your fighter just got poked a little bit with like a serious numbing agent, and suddenly he falls over and you're down a tank. So, that's something to think about. Especially things that like they're not gonna understand or maybe have no bearing at all. Like, there are 6 skeletons here. One of them has, a huge arm with a big fist that reaches the floor. It's like somebody took his arm off and replaced it with a skeleton giant's arm. That skeleton over there has glowing blue eyes and the lower jaw of a baby dragon. He's gonna breathe icicles at you. That skeleton over there has, 3 heads, and he's got fucking 4 arms, because our necromancer got really creative. He's got a sword, a falchion, a shield, and like, I don't know, a buzzsaw or something weird that doesn't even belong in the setting. And, he's going to do 4 attacks anytime he comes near somebody. Dress it up. Change one thing, and it will be unique. Have a will-o-wisp inside the rib cage of one of them, and that serves as their torch when they're out looking for adventurers or looking for, innocent civilians to, cull this village that is filled with plague. We send in skeletons, and the will-o-wisp inside its rib cage brings out curious people to get slaughtered, or lights the area so they can see better. And they do have, skeletons do have, I think, dark vision 60 feet, but still, light sources still help. They do have basic senses and cunning. They're not going to be planning any football games anytime soon, though that would be fucking hilarious. Even though they're undead, they do possess a basic cunning, so they can do like hammer and anvil traps. They can do distractions. They can do very basic plans. They're not intelligent as they were when they were alive, but they're not stupid either. They're, like I said, they're basically goblin-level creatures, kobold-level sort of things, just without the infrastructure. So a group of them running around can still do some serious harm. Other things as a DM that you need to worry about is things like turning. Because as soon as undead pop out, the cleric in the group is going to be like, yes! Or the paladin in the group is going to be like, yes! And whip out their holy symbol and go, turn undead! And then about 2/3 of your paladins and clerics are going to look over at you and go, how does turning work again? So it is a good idea before you run undead, before you run skeletons, to just go into the book, put it on a photocopier, pull it up on your laptop, or even just like get a note card like I do. Write it down and make like 2 copies, 3 copies, whatever. One for yourself, one for your cleric, one for your paladin. You know, the people that are going to be doing it, you know, don't show it to them beforehand because God knows that'll tell them there's undead coming. But have it in front of you so that there are no arguments, so that there are no stutters in gameplay, because nothing makes a game suck more than going, you know, turn undead. How does that work? Oh, damn. Well, let me pull down this book. Turn undead, turn undead. Don't let it happen. That's not cool. That stutters your game, and that shows a lack of preparation on your part. And yeah, it shows a lack of preparation on your player's part, but there's nothing really that you can do about that unless they're just, you know, devoted enough that they've got that shit ready, but most of the time they're not gonna. Let's be honest with ourselves. They'll be like, oh, I can turn undead. How do I do that? Or, you know, oh, I can summon nature's ally. What creatures can I pick from? 9 times out of 10, they're not going to have it in front of them, so it's kind of up to you, unfortunately. So, for turn undead, make sure you know how many hit dice each skeleton has, you know, what their resistances that they don't have. Like, some undead don't have fortitude saves, just because if they did, they would just keep going and going and going, and, you know, you could break them into a million pieces and they'd still wiggle, you know? They don't have fortitude saves. So have all the stuff that has to do with turning in front of you. Like I said, cold immunity, remember that. Some of them have healing factors. There's, what are they called? Blood skeletons? I think they're not quite juicy enough to be zombies, but like there's certain areas of their body that might still have flesh on them or have like fungus on them or something like that, and it gives them like a minor healing factor to where they gain like, you know, their hit dice and hit points back every round or something like that. There are so many variations. You cannot just say, oh, skeletons pop out, because no, you know, oh, there's a skeleton with 4 arms and 4 fucking falchions coming your way. And, you know, that skeleton has no head, and instead of having a head, he's got a dragon's skull. And that one has, you know, a will-o-wisp in his chest, and his eyes are, like, lit on fire, and he can shoot you from across the room with freaking Superman laser vision. Dress it up. Make it cool. Make it scary. Scare the fuck out of them. Have it in a weird location, like they're not even gonna fucking expect. Like, yeah, we're going down into the crypt, and they go down the stairs, and like 2/3 of the way down the stairs, they pop out of the fucking wall, you know, hug you, and then explode like fucking bombs. I forget what those were in Pathfinder. There's not shard skeletons, but something like that. They were basically like kamikaze skeletons. Their point was to run up and like bear hug you and explode for like fucking 5d6 of damage. That'll scare the shit out of them. Even if there's like only one in the entrance and all the other skeletons are normal, suddenly skeletons are far more scary than they were before, because what if one of them hugs me and blows up with all the force of a fucking grenade bomb? Or, what else? There was normal, shatter skeletons, blood skeletons, and I'm just running off the regular, like, human, elven, dwarven, not like bone dragons or anything. That'd be fucking awesome if there was, like, a shatter skeleton that was based off of a dragon. Just be like, oh, it's a bone dragon boss fight, and they pull out all their spells and stuff, and the dragon just, like, runs into their faces and, like grabs the cleric in one hand and grabs the ranger in the other hand, and then just like throws himself on top of the tank and blows the fuck up. That'd be amazing. That'd be kind of a dickish thing to do. And, you know, just from a necromancer standpoint, acquiring a dragon skeleton only to blow it up in one shot would be a serious waste of money, but it'd be fucking amazing. You'd be sure to kill everybody. Let's see, what else? I've got my bestiary for Pathfinder here. Got the page marked. Yeah, bloody skeletons have a healing factor equal to their hit dice. Burning skeleton. Surrounded by an aura of flames and deals fire damage to those that strikes. It's not that interesting. Skeletal Champions is a different kind of skeleton. Challenge rating of 2 by himself. He's an acquired template that can be added to any corporeal creature that has a skeletal system. Well, yeah, you're not going to make a skeleton out of an octopus. They don't have a lot of bones. A skeletal champion gains damage resistance 5 to bludgeoning, channel resistance +4, and immunity to cold. Gains skill ranks. Okay, skeleton champions have skill ranks. That's the difference. Because regular skeletons, I think, lose all of their skill points in everything. Because why would they? You know, a skeleton who is a carpenter doesn't really make any sense. But yeah, dress them up, have them do unusual things, because skeletons by themselves are boring, uninteresting, and not scary. But if they blow up, or have heat vision, or you replace one of their skulls with a dragon's skull and it can shoot acid across the room, then it gets interesting. Or if it's got 4 fucking arms and 3 of them have shields, and it, like, if it's 10 feet tall, it can, like, shield the other skeletons if they're being shot at or whatever. Make it exotic, you know, use it as a skeletal system and then dress it up to be something interesting. You know, make a kamikaze skeleton at the very front of the crypt. You know, give them flaming swords or boots that let them walk on the ceiling. Fuck with your players. The best way to make a crypt or any undead setting scary is to make sure that it has a flavor. Make sure it's memorable. You know, a bunch of shambling skeletons, you know, oh, whoop-de-doo, everybody get out your maces, you know, or your branches, your fists, you know, put your bow and arrow away, man. We can just, like, fisticuff these things. And then as soon as you punch them and break the skull, then, you know, the C4 goes off and you regret everything. So, those are just some thoughts, some ideas for running a relatively unappreciated monster, or template, rather, as far as skeletons. And yeah, there's different rules for zombies, those different rules for vampires and liches, and we'll get into that. I'll try to do as many as I can here in October around Halloween. And if you've ever run into, like, unique undead, unique skeletons, like, put it in the comments below, just to, like, go with the Halloween theme. When was the last time you ran into, like, just a regular skeleton? Was that super boring for you? Or did your DM do something unexpected? Like, was he bait, standing on a big magic circle, and as soon as you kill him and you're on the magic circle, then, oh, it's an exploding rune, and then it blows you all the fuck up. Put your experiences in the comments below. I want to hear from you guys. So, till next time, keep gaming.